Traicionada y herida, la Reina Alienígena susurró. No debes tocarme, humano. The chamber was never meant to be quiet. For thousands of cycles, the hall of convergence had been filled with thought voices, shared emotions, and the constant hum of unity. Every wall, every living structure, had once pulsed with the agreement of millions of minds thinking as one. Now, the vast space felt hollow, like something sacred had been abandoned. At the center of the chamber lay the queen. Zirkel, sovereign of the Lithari collective, was not dead, but she was no longer whole. Her form rested on a cradle of living crystal, its surface dim and fractured, responding poorly to her weakening presence. Light that once flowed through her like breath now flickered, uneven and strained. The elegant crown-like structures along her head twitched without rhythm, searching for a harmony that was no longer there. She was alone. Not truly alone, there were observers, distant and careful, but alone in the way that mattered most to her kind. The collective mind that had always surrounded her, supported her, defined her, was gone, severed by law, by betrayal. Across the chamber, a human stood uncertainly near the entrance. Elia's work had been trained for many things: negotiation, translation, emotional restraint. He had spent years learning how not to offend species that communicated through color shifts, electromagnetic pulses, or shared dreams. None of that training prepared him for the sight of a galactic queen lying broken in silence. He was not supposed to be here. Humans were not trusted with moments like this. They were observers at best, tolerated guests at worst. A young species, too loud in emotion, too individual, too unstable, yet every other delegate had left, some out of fear, some out of obedience. Some because they believed the queen was already lost. Elias took a slow step forward. The floor adjusted beneath his boots, responding sluggishly. The chamber noticed him but did not welcome him. Zirkel sensed the disturbance immediately. Her remaining awareness recoiled, instinctively drawing inward. The presence approaching her was sharp, unfiltered, unbearably singular, a mind like a burning point instead of a flowing sea. Human. Her voice emerged weakly, no longer carried through the collective but forced through failing biological channels. No, debes, tocarme, humano. The words were not spoken aloud in sound alone. They brushed against Elias's thoughts, fragile and strained like glass about to crack. He froze. The warning was not angry, it was afraid. Elias raised his hands slightly, palms open, a universal gesture that had somehow survived first contact. He did not move closer, but he did not retreat either. "I won't," he said softly. "I promise. I didn't know if you were alone." A strange question to ask a queen. A stranger one to ask a being who had never truly known solitude. Zirkel tried to answer, but her mind slipped instead into memory. She remembered the moment the council had turned away. Not with hatred, not with weapons, but with silence. A legal silence. An ancient protocol older than her reign, older than her species' fear of chaos. Consensus withdrawal. They had claimed it was necessary, that the collective could not survive uncertainty. That her recent decisions, allowing independent species greater autonomy, permitting human diplomats to speak as equals, had introduced dangerous individualism. They did not strike her down. They simply stopped believing in her. And belief, for the Lithari, was life. Elias felt something shift in the air like pressure before a storm that never came. He swallowed, suddenly aware that the stillness around him was not peace but restraint. "There are systems failing," he said carefully, glancing at the dim structures around the queen. "Your bionetwork is collapsing if nothing is done." "I know," Zirkel replied. Her awareness flickered again, weakening. She focused on the human because there was nothing else left to focus on. No shared thoughts, no guiding harmony. Only this loud, singular mind standing far too close. "Why are you still here?" she asked. Elias hesitated. The honest answer felt too simple to be appropriate in a room that had once shaped the fate of star systems. "Because leaving felt wrong," he said. That answer made no sense to her. Wrong was a concept the collective decided together. An individual could not feel it alone, yet the human spoke as if it were obvious. He took another step forward before he could stop himself. The crystal floor creaked faintly, protesting the breach of protocol. Zirkel's remaining senses flared in alarm. "Do not," she whispered more urgently now. "Your kind disrupts. You do not harmonize. You fracture patterns simply by being near them." "I know," Elias said. "They've told us." Every report the galaxy had on humans described the same things. Emotional volatility, unpredictable responses, minds that resisted synchronization. They were not dangerous because they were violent, most were not, but because they could not be safely integrated. Zirkel had once argued that this was precisely why they mattered. Now she wondered if that belief had doomed her. Elias stopped again, torn between instinct and fear. He could see the faint tremors running through her form, the way her biolight struggled to remain coherent. She was not dying from injury, she was dissolving from disconnection. "There's something," he said slowly, choosing his words as if stepping across thin ice. "An old archive, not Lithari, pre-collective records. It mentions a failsafe for rulers cut off from their network." Zirkel focused on him sharply. "Impossible." "That's what everyone said," Elias replied, "but humans, we don't do well with impossible. We usually treat it like a challenge." Her remaining crown structures twitched weakly. "Speak." "The record talks about anchoring," he continued. "Not through consensus, through continuity, a single stable reference point, one mind, one presence." Silence spread again, deeper than before. Zirkel understood the implication immediately, and terror followed. "No," she said. "That would shatter you or me, or both. A collective reduced to one mind is madness." Elias shook his head. "Not for us." He did not say it with pride. He said it like a fact learned early and lived with daily. "We grow up that way," he added quietly. "One mind at a time." Her thoughts faltered. A species that began in isolation and survived, that built civilizations without shared consciousness. The idea felt unstable, almost offensive to everything she was. "You would risk your mind," she said, "for a queen who is already condemned." Elias looked at her then, really looked, past the light and form and power she once held. He saw someone abandoned by her own people, not for cruelty, but for choosing uncertainty over control. "I would," he said, "because I think that's what they're afraid of. And I don't think fear should get the last word." The systems around them dimmed further. The chamber issued a silent alert, a nonverbal declaration that the Queen's core was reaching critical dissolution. Zirkel felt herself slipping. She had ruled star clusters. She had spoken with the voice of millions. Now all she could sense clearly was the human's presence, too bright, too focused, too alone. "No debes tocarme," she whispered again, but the words were weaker now. Less command, more plea. Elias stepped forward anyway. He did not rush. He did not reach out like a hero in a story. His hand trembled slightly as he extended it, aware that this moment would define how the galaxy remembered humans, if it remembered them at all. Observers beyond the chamber walls reacted instantly. Systems flared. Warnings spread. The human was violating the oldest boundary in Lithari existence. Contact without consensus. Elias's fingers closed gently around the Queen's hand. There was no explosion, no scream, no collapse of reality. Instead, everything stopped. The biolight around Zirkel froze, suspended mid-flicker. The chamber's hum cut out completely. Even the distant observers felt their instruments go silent, as if the universe itself had paused to watch. Inside Zirkel's mind, the endless noise of fading connections vanished. For the first time since her birth, there was nothing, no chorus, no guidance, no echo of others, only silence. And within that silence, a single presence remained, steady, unyielding, human. She did not know yet whether that presence would save her or end her. But for the first time since the betrayal, she was not disappearing, and that alone changed everything. Silence did not feel empty. Zirkel expected nothingness when the collective vanished completely. She expected fear, collapse, or madness. Instead, the silence had shape. It was narrow, focused, and steady, like standing on solid ground after a lifetime of floating. There was only one presence with her now, human. Elias did not know how long he stood there holding the Queen's hand. Time felt strange. The chamber no longer reacted to anything. Systems that once responded instantly to her were frozen, unable to understand what she had become. He felt pressure behind his eyes, not pain but weight, like standing too close to something important. "You're still here," he said softly, more to himself than to her. Zirkel's awareness shifted slowly, carefully, afraid that moving too much would break this fragile state. The human mind was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It did not flow outward, it did not seek connection. It simply existed, solid and contained. "Yes," she replied, "so are you." Her voice was clearer now, still weak but no longer fading. Beyond the chamber, alarms began to trigger. The observers could not access the Queen's core. Their shared awareness slid off her like water over stone. Panic spread through the council. For the first time in their history, the queen was thinking alone. This had never happened. Inside the chamber, Elias finally felt something shift. The pressure eased. The queen's biolight began to move again, slow but stable, no longer flickering. "I don't think it's hurting you," he said. Zirkel studied the sensation carefully. She was still severed from the collective. That had not changed. But she was not dissolving anymore. "You are acting as an anchor," she said. "Your mind is incompatible. The system cannot absorb you, so it stopped trying." Elias let out a slow breath he did not realize he was holding. "That's good, right?" "Yes," she said. "It is unprecedented." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The quiet felt different now, not empty, chosen. Then the chamber doors began to open. Members of the Lithari Council entered carefully, their forms glowing with shared concern and controlled fear. They felt the absence immediately. The queen was no longer part of them. One of them stepped forward. "Sovereign, the human has violated sacred law. Remove him and we will restore." "No," Zirkel said. The word carried weight again. The council froze. They could hear her voice, but they could not feel her thoughts. The separation unsettled them deeply. "You cannot sustain yourself alone," another counselor said. "This state is unstable. You will collapse without us." Zirkel tightened her grasp slightly around Elias's hand. He did not pull away. "I was collapsing with you," she replied. "You mistook harmony for strength." The council exchanged silent signals, confused and disturbed. Their shared certainty began to crack. "Elias Rourke," one of them said, finally addressing the human directly. "Release the sovereign, you endanger the collective." Elias looked up, heart pounding. He felt very small suddenly, very human. "She's not asking me to," he said. "That is irrelevant," the counselor replied. "Humans do not understand the cost of—" "I do," Elias interrupted, surprising even himself. "You think being alone is death. For us, it's the beginning." The council recoiled slightly, disturbed by the confidence in his voice. Zirkel watched them closely. For the first time, she was seeing her own people without the softening influence of shared thought. Individual fear, individual ambition, individual comfort with control. "You feared what I allowed," she said. "Not because it was dangerous, but because it could not be shared. You withdrew consensus to protect yourselves." "That is governance," the council replied. "No," Zirkel said calmly, "that is stagnation." She released Elias's hand slowly. The connection did not break. It remained lighter now, but still present. She did not fall. She did not fade. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "I no longer require consensus to exist," she continued. "Your law failed because it assumed no being could survive alone." She turned her gaze fully to Elias. "You were wrong about humans." The council stiffened. "Sovereign, you are compromised." "Yes," she agreed, "by choice." She addressed the chamber now, her voice carrying without the old psychic amplification. It was quieter but sharper. "The collective will remain," she said, "but it will no longer define truth alone. Individuals will speak, dissent will exist, connection will be voluntary." "This will fracture us," a counselor said. "Good," she replied. "Fragments can move, stone cannot." Beyond the chamber, the wider galactic network was already reacting. Reports spread rapidly. The Lithari Queen had survived disconnection. A human had touched her and lived. A governing mind had chosen individuality. Fear followed wonder. Elias stepped back respectfully, finally letting go. He felt drained but whole. He had not lost himself. If anything, he felt more certain of who he was. "I should go," he said quietly. Zirkel looked at him for a long moment. "You will stay," she said. "Not as an anchor, as an example." The council protested, but she silenced them with a glance. "The humans will be reevaluated," she announced. "Not as a minor species, not as a threat, but as a reference." "Reference for what?" Elias asked. "For survival without harmony," she answered. "For identity without permission." The galaxy would debate this moment for generations. Some would call it the beginning of chaos. Others would call it evolution. As Elias walked beside the queen toward the chamber exit, he felt the weight of countless unseen eyes. Humans had never conquered the stars through force. They had not outnumbered anyone. They had simply learned long ago how to stand alone without breaking, and now the galaxy was finally learning why that mattered. Zirkel paused once more before the doors. "Before," she said softly, "I told you not to touch me." Elias nodded. "I know." "Now," she continued, "I will ask when I wish to be reminded that I am more than a voice in a crowd." She extended her hand. He took it without fear, and the universe adjusted. The universe did not change all at once. That was the first thing Elias noticed in the days that followed. There was no sudden collapse of alliances, no mass panic, no stars going dark. Ships still traveled their lanes. Councils still argued. Civilizations still believed they understood themselves. But something had shifted underneath everything. Zirkel felt it more clearly than anyone. She moved through the hall of convergence without the constant pull of other minds. The silence inside her was no longer frightening. It had become a space she could enter and leave at will. Sometimes, when the pressure of leadership grew heavy, she stepped into that quiet and remembered what it felt like to exist as a single being. The collective still surrounded her when she allowed it. Millions of thoughts brushed against her awareness, but they no longer defined her shape. She was queen by choice now, not by necessity. This alone terrified the council. They met often, speaking more than before because silence no longer carried meaning. Each member now had to decide what they believed before sharing it. This was slow, painfully slow. Humans, Elias realized, would have found this normal. He spent his days as an advisor, though no one had officially given him that title. He walked beside alien minds older than his species and spoke without shared thought, without psychic harmony, without certainty that anyone truly understood him. And still they listened. Because the queen listened, other species began to arrive. First came observers, carefully neutral, claiming curiosity. Then scholars, then diplomats. They asked questions they had never dared to ask before. How did humans survive isolation? Why did their societies not collapse under contradiction? How could one mind hold belief without reinforcement? Elias answered honestly, even when the answers felt small. We fail a lot, he said. We disagree all the time, we build things that break, but we don't stop being ourselves when we're wrong. This confused many of them. Some species had evolved without individuality. Others had abandoned it long ago in favor of stability. To them, contradiction was danger. To humans, it was daily life. Zirkel watched these conversations with quiet interest. She had ruled through certainty for centuries. Now she ruled through tension. The galaxy did not like tension. A delegation from the Viral arrived one cycle later. Their kind were known for perfect internal alignment. Every decision, every belief, every emotion was shared instantly. They were powerful, efficient, and deeply fragile. Their representative stood before the queen and spoke through a single voice made of many. You have contaminated governance, they said. By elevating the individual, you invite fracture. Fracture invites collapse. Zirkel did not answer immediately. She looked to Elias instead. He did not speak, but he met her gaze without flinching. She turned back to the delegation. You mistake fracture for failure, she said. You believe unity is strength because you fear standing alone. The Viral recoiled slightly. Fear rippled through their shared awareness. We have endured for millions of cycles, they replied, without internal conflict. And without growth, Zirkel said. You remain unchanged because change requires someone to say no. The delegation withdrew soon after. Not in anger, but unease. Word spread quickly after that. Some species quietly revised their education systems. Others began experimental governance models with limited individuality. A few outlawed all contact with humans entirely. Fear always traveled faster than understanding. Elias received reports from Earth that surprised him. Human leaders were nervous. They had never intended to become a standard. Humans had always assumed they were barely tolerated. Now the galaxy was watching them. You didn't plan this, Zirkel said to him one evening as they stood overlooking a living star map. Yet you accept it. Elias shrugged slightly. We're used to being misunderstood. Being studied is just a different kind of pressure. You are not afraid? She asked. I am, he said, but fear doesn't tell us who we are, it just tells us something matters. She considered that for a long time. Not all reactions were peaceful. A distant coalition attempted to replicate what had happened to Zirkel. They forcibly severed a ruling mind from its collective, believing individuality could be installed like a system update. It failed. The ruler collapsed, unable to exist without consensus. The damage spread through the coalition like shock through a nervous system. The lesson was clear. Humans were not a method, they were a context. Zirkel addressed the Galactic Assembly soon after. For the first time, she spoke without mental amplification, her voice carried only by sound and translation. Individuality cannot be imposed, she said. It must be survived. Many understood then, many more pretended they did not. Elias prepared to leave weeks later. His assignment had long since exceeded its scope. Earth requested his return, politely but firmly. When he told Zirkel, she did not stop him. "You will return to your people," she said, "and we will continue to change without you." He smiled. "That sounds like growth." She extended her hand once more, not in need, not in weakness, in acknowledgement. He took it. When Elias boarded the human vessel and left Lithari space, the galaxy did not sigh in relief. It held its breath, because the most frightening thing the humans had shown was not power or rebellion or defiance. It was proof. Proof that a mind could stand alone, be wrong, be afraid, and still choose to exist. And once that idea entered the universe, it could not be erased. The stars kept burning. But now they were being watched by beings who knew they did not need permission to look back. Distance did not weaken the connection. That surprised Zirkel. When the human ship crossed the edge of Lithari space and vanished into folded light, she expected something to fade inside her. Not pain, not loss, just absence. That was how the collective worked. Presence mattered only while it was near. But Elias Rourke's influence did not vanish. Not as a voice, not as a thought. It remained as a shape inside her mind, a memory of standing alone without falling apart. The silence he had shown her was still accessible, still stable. That frightened her more than losing him would have, because it meant change was permanent. The council felt it too. They could not name it, but their meetings grew longer and more uncomfortable. No shared certainty guided them anymore. Every proposal required explanation. Every objection had to be spoken aloud. Some members resented this deeply. Others felt something close to relief. One counselor, older than most, began speaking less in meetings. Instead, they spent long cycles disconnected from the collective, experimenting with solitude in small, controlled amounts. When asked why, they answered simply, "I wanted to hear my own thoughts." That answer would have been unthinkable before. Across the galaxy, reactions continued to ripple outward. Human space became crowded with observers, not invaders, not allies, watchers. Species who had never allowed outsiders near their core worlds now sent quiet probes and listening stations. They studied human media, human history, human mistakes. They were confused. Humans fought among themselves. Humans disagreed loudly. Humans changed their minds. Entire belief systems rose and fell within a few centuries. And yet humanity endured, not as a single purpose. Not as a harmony, as a contradiction that refused to die. On Earth, leaders argued over what it meant to be a reference species. Some wanted to shape the narrative, to present humans as wise guides. Others wanted to retreat, afraid of cultural contamination or responsibility. Elias returned to none of that. He declined formal positions. He wrote reports, yes, but he also walked through cities listening. He knew something the politicians did not. Humans could not teach individuality, they could only live it. Back among the stars, Zirkel faced her greatest test yet. A coalition of collectives requested an emergency assembly. Their message was careful, respectful, and heavy with fear. One of their member civilizations was failing, not collapsing, not rebelling, drifting. Their shared mind had begun to weaken, not because of attack, but because individuals within it had started pulling away. Quietly, gently, choosing moments of separation. The system had no response for this. "We believe," the coalition said, "that exposure to human concepts has destabilized them." Zirkel did not deny it. "They have seen another way to exist," she replied. "You cannot make them unsee it." The coalition asked for permission to intervene, not with force. With correction, with enforced reconnection. Zirkel closed her eyes. Once she would have agreed without hesitation. Stability mattered more than freedom. Survival mattered more than choice. Now she felt the weight of that silence again, the one she had stood in alone. "No," she said, the word echoed far beyond the chamber. "If you force them back," she continued, "you will not restore harmony, you will create fear. Fear spreads faster than dissent." "They may collapse," the coalition warned. "Yes," she said, "they might." The admission shocked them. "You would allow an entire civilization to risk itself." "I would allow them the chance to choose," Zirkel replied. "Survival without choice is only delay." The assembly ended without agreement. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a queen chose uncertainty over preservation. The failing civilization did not collapse, it fractured. Parts of it separated cleanly, forming smaller collectives. Some individuals left entirely, becoming something new. There was confusion, Loss, reinvention, it was messy, it survived. That single outcome changed everything. The galaxy had always feared chaos. Now it learned to fear stagnation more. Zirkel stood alone in the Hall of Convergence one cycle later, gazing at the living crystal walls as they slowly adapted to her new state. They no longer glowed in unison. Patterns emerged and faded, imperfect but alive. She thought of the human again. Not as an anchor this time, as a mirror. Humans were not strong because they resisted connection. They were strong because connection was optional, chosen, renewed every day. That was the truth no collective had understood. Far away, Elias watched a sunrise over Earth and felt the same quiet certainty. The galaxy would not become human. It did not need to. It only needed to remember that existence did not require permission. And that was more than enough to change the universe forever.